Okay. I have something to share that is valuable in your decision making, Mr. President, about cannabis. This is a testimony that, in Jesus' name, I'm going to give you that I believe will help with your decision making, whatever it is, when it comes to cannabis. And here we go. Here we go. As you know, um, I am challenged with adult attention deficit disorder. It's a real, it's a real challenge. It's a real deal. Now the thing is, I was as a kid, that expresses itself in many ways. Hold on. This can be very self-sabotaging, destructive, because there's an impetuousness involved with that, which is probably apparent in this thread. Look, I just want to say again, I had a doctor that had prescribed it for me, and the VA wouldn't help me pay for the prescription when I moved from Georgia to Pennsylvania. You see, I lost that doctor. He was a state there in Georgia, and tried to get it through, here through the VA, and they fucked me around and wouldn't even help me pay for a script when I did then get a doctor here to prescribe it, and I couldn't afford it, so I lost the medication. I've been off of it now for years. I wanted to say that. That's another way the VA, has fucked me around. Okay, now let me get back to the cannabis thing here. Okay, so when I was, when I was a kid, my parents were never, I had good parents, and I had a good provider. My dad, I don't have anything negative. My mother, she was tormented, by just some generational spirits, that I discovered, was she was very challenged. So my mother was abusive, but it was because she was vexed with spirits. She needed deliverance. That being said, you know, um, I don't know what brings on, attention deficit disorder. What kind of biological factors there are, or what kind of factors there are, in the way I was raised. They're probably a combination, I'm sure. But I'm gonna give, let like, so when that fucked me up, when it came to my schooling. When I started, like, whoever it was that I don't remember, which I don't want to give testimony in Christ about whoever it was that influenced me into smoking, marijuana. But that, bringing that into the mix with, having that challenge with attention deficit deficit disorder, that was fucking a done deal. That fucked me all up, with my academics, my study, and everything. I don't think I even read but one book the whole my all the years that I was in school. Because of the fucking marijuana. So yeah, I used to. That's and the worst thing that the worst thing that happened, because I wanted I no let me go ahead and address this about the spiritual aspect of marijuana. Look, it's been used, you know as far as human history has been recorded, as a way to commune with spirits. uh, Marijuana, something about it breaks down our will, our and makes it easy for spirits to control us. It's been used for spirit mediumship. That's the danger, is that spirits can have influence over human beings more easily with whatever it is that those compounds. We're talking about chemical compounds in marijuana. I mean, even for anyone today that is medicinally, using cannabis, they should be immersed in the word. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you are, uh, not in, drawing near to the living God. Let's just put it that way, just plain. So I know this from experience. Different spirits, would have influence. There are, spirits, like one you get, people think that it's a strain, like there'll be a strain of bud, flower that will different strains they think bring out different things, like hold on a second, 1 minute at a time, 1 minute of thoughts, but yeah, okay. It's like a Twitter exercise, isn't it? You got those succinct tweets that discipline you to put together, a succinct, terse message, huh? But I haven't had Twitter for a while. They permanently suspended my account. So, anyway, yeah, it's not so much the strains, like one would, there are different things. Like, you would one time you would get high and you would have these Einstein moments, and another time you'd be paranoid, have a paranoia. Another time you'd be in the excuse me, you get into trouble fornicating. There's all these different things that happen, but it's not that it's a strain. It's that they're different spirits. Spirits that are involved in fornicating. Would influence, and they influence the others that like someone else if they're high on cocaine or whatever the hell. I've never done cocaine, but I'm saying that's a drug. That I know spirits can be active with fornication, but it's true. So then the spirits would work together, you know what I mean, to influence, that, it's, I know, just to someone who doesn't have any spiritual discernment, it sounds insane what I just said, but it's true. And spirits can influence you into believing things, that are like can convince you that you just drank, something that was poison. You'll be convinced that you're gonna die, or the horrible, ways that they can mess with you like that. Um, it's there is a spiritual element, man. That's a danger. With THC. I can't speak about other drugs because I've never, it's like that as far as being that people have said that it's a gateway, that to other drugs. I've never had an interest in anything, like, doing other drugs. Never did. And I never really had an addiction to marijuana. It's the destructive. I'll tell you what. It can be. I don't know. It's habitual, and if you have destructive, self-destructive tendencies that are you've been trained up in, your behavior, it can make you more susceptible to its use. You know, I don't know. I really could speak at length about this, but it's not necessary. Just plainly, I'm saying that our youth should not have easy access to cannabis. Should not. Should not. It's wrong to allow that to happen, because cannabis, man, can just sabotage, our youth. look, I may not be the, I don't know. I do remember that I had my IQ tested and it was above normal. Like, I remember that's one thing that was done. I don't know where I'm at, but I'm not dumb. It's like, in Jesus' name, if I put my mind to something, if I can focus, I probably could have done just about anything. I know that. With the challenges I have, with whatever this attention deficit disorder is, I still, whatever it is that I really commit to and immerse into, I succeed in. And I don't know what would stop me. Because cannabis, man, can just sabotage, our youth. Look, I may not be the, I don't know. I do remember that I had my IQ tested and it was above normal. Like, I remember that's one thing that was done. I don't know where I'm at, but I'm not dumb. It's like, in Jesus' name, if I put my mind to something, if I can focus, I can, I probably could have done just about anything. I know that. With the challenges I have, with whatever this attention deficit disorder is, I still, whatever it is that I really commit to and immerse into, I succeed in. And I don't know what would stop me. I've never felt intimidated, about anything to learn. I've always, I have great respect for like polyglots that, can learn so many languages, and mathematicians, that can work with uh, numbers, and it's something that's not something that I ever had a good teacher. If I would have had a good teacher, I probably would have, whatever that uh, deficit, is there, I would have been overcome. Never had a good teacher, but the teachers that I had that were good, I excelled, and their strengths, are pronounced, you know. Ah, maybe that's for the same for everyone. I don't know, but marijuana, man. Let me tell you about one thing that happened to me because marijuana was in the mix. Something that was life changing for me. Though there were so many things that were life changing because of marijuana in my youth, it fucked me up. But there was this time I had that, a friend that was spending the night. It was near July, 4th. We were coming up on right before the 4th of July. He came over, he spent the night, and my mother, she would take in strays, people that needed help. She had a kind heart that way to help people, and we'd always have somebody staying with us. And there was an Amish young man that had left the Amish clan. He had been our farrier, my shod our horses, and he was my mother, my dad. We all liked him, and my mom and dad. My dad had to be in agreement, but they allowed him to move in with us, and he had his own little, like, small apartment set up. This little shack that was fixed up, in the back of the house there, where our farm was, the little farm. His name was Stephen Benjamin Kurtz. And Steve, he was a few years older than me. And he was much more of as far as with the chores and everything, farm chores, like, he was a master, being raised, in an Amish clan. It's not to say that I couldn't have, my work ethics, are certainly, as on par with anything of him, but he had experience, in what can I say? I got to give it up. The guy would, Anyway, look, Steve was, he was favored that way, even though he wasn't a relation, to my parents. But they took him in, and I think you get the picture. But Steve could get buy alcohol. He was of age, and I was, I think, 13 at the time. And I had over a friend that was spending the night, Carl Jenkins. And here's what happened. I asked Steve to buy us some beer, and he did. He brought it back. Steve had gone out, and he came back with the beer. And I had some cannabis. Don't remember where I got the cannabis from. Some bad influence, somebody. It was no one of my, immediate family or anything, because they didn't do that, mom or dad, nor did they drink, But there it was, a combination of that beer and the cannabis. Carl Jenkins and I was in my dad's garage, and I was working on this bicycle, putting like extension forks on a bike, welding. My dad had a pretty decent, he had a few things like a welder, an arc welder, and acetylene tanks, and a nice workbench, and a lot of tools and shit, My dad didn't know we were in a garage. This is past their bedtime. This is in the middle of the night. Like when I say middle of the night, maybe 1 a.m. There it is, 1 a.m. They're sleeping. Maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock. Okay, that, middle. But been, under the influence of the cannabis and being, attention deficit disorder challenged. The combination of that and the alcohol. Got to throw it in together. The impetuousness of what I did, it really cost me. My dad had access to fertilizer from open cast mining. He worked for a cement company and had everything to do with where they, mined, open cast mining, where they mine the limestone. And so he had access to explosives and gunpowder or what have you. But he had this gunpowder that was in the name of the soda is Paul's Beverages. It would be like a 1/4-inch thick quart bottles of Paul's Beverages. He had one of those it was half full of gunpowder. The gunpowder was like the gunpowder that, I thought that he had got it from where he worked. I don't know where the hell he got it, but he had it down there in the garage, and it was in a bottle of Paul's Beverages in the garage. And I'm sure my dad regretted, that, but, how the hell would he have known that I would have fucked around with that gunpowder? But I saw it there, and I was doing some welding. So the impetuousness, how dangerous cannabis thrown into the mix was with this, is that I had started a fire with the arc welder on the cement floor of that garage. Why the fuck did I do this? You see, I'm just saying, being under the influence, do you know I took hold of that bottle and I started to pour that gunpowder onto that fucking fire. Think about how fucking stupid that sounds. Well, the gunpowder, it was like the gunpowder you'd see in a rifle round. Like if you know anything about gunpowder, not the flaky shotgun kind of like gunpowder, but what you'd find in a rifle, like a round, in the brass, what you would find inside of it. I do remember that, and I remember when I started. Here's what happened: I started to pour. I remember everything with this explosion and everything, what happened, but of course, when I started pouring it on the fire, I didn't know this was going to happen, but all I heard was a sucking sound, and then the thump, when it exploded, and everything, my ears were ringing, and the glass, the friend that was with me, Carl Jenkins, he was like standing partially like behind me, so he didn't get the blast of the glass when that bottle exploded, but it blew like in different parts of my body, glass. And I even had, I had a major artery in my arm, and would you believe I survived, where I even had my, is that the femur artery, the one, even, the artery there, I think, you wouldn't believe me, I'm telling you the truth, I had 2 arteries that were severed, and fucking glass, man, just blown all through me, and burnt too from the gunpowder that stuck to me in different places and burnt. But there was a watering trough, we had a natural spring on the farm, and there was a watering trough, a spring house, where we're coming to, we'd pump it from there to the house, but then it flowed underground from the spring house. It would go to a trough out near the road. A road, but just right in front, little area, little distance from the spring house, there was a watering trough that we could bring our horses to get a drink or what have you. And I was given, it was God given, to be guided to get into that water, and that slowed down my heartbeat. The water's cold. It's spring, a natural spring. And it's, it didn't give me a heart attack. I could have had a heart attack from that, the condition I was in, but it slowed me down, my heart rate and everything, and or I would have bled out. And then I got up out of that I was still able to walk. Got up and I walked into the house and sat down at the kitchen table, and my parents came out screaming. They saw me. I must have been a real fucking horror show, Carl ended up with just a concussion because I was in the way of the blast, but he did have a concussion. But my parents, they managed to guide me down the sidewalk. They had to be careful where they handled me because I had fucking like nerves. I was a mess. You could see my nerves outside of the wounds and shit. Like they had to just handle me carefully, in the way to lead me down to the truck, my dad's truck. And I fell then a lot. Then my body just gave out. The weight, I couldn't hold the weight of my body because of the loss of blood. And I fell, and I was underneath the truck, and they're trying to get me from out of underneath the truck because they had to be careful where they grabbed me because there were so many fucking lacerations from the glass. I was just a fucking mess, But they managed to get me out of that, to give me encouragement or whatever to crawl from out because when I fell, I went right underneath the truck. Like that's how it was weird. But like when I started to fall, my body weight just propelled me. They couldn't hold me, the weight of me. Then I fell underneath the truck. But when they did get me in the truck, my dad managed to make it over to the hospital in Elwood City, Pennsylvania. Elwood, the closest hospital. I don't know if they were able to call anybody ahead of time. I'm not sure. But that ride over there, man, my dad was motoring it, It was a close call. Got me over there, and the doctor that did the surgery, his name is Dr. Raymond Raimondo, the surgeon. Dr. Raimondo, he had spent I don't know how many years, how many tours or what have you, as a combat surgeon in Vietnam. He was Filipino, and he worked, he was in, I'm not sure what branch, of service, but that's what he did. And he said that my injuries were the same as what he saw with, soldiers that had been in, like, grenades, when a grenade explodes and, close by them. That's the kind of shit, He said it was, except the glass made it more challenging because, there was glass that they couldn't get from out of me. So I ended up having glass that was, left in my body. But man, I was a fucking mess. And that was it. I had one thing I was really good at was football, before that, in like midget Pop Warner ball. Yeah, couldn't go back to any combat sports and because of the glass. And rehabbing from that, we didn't have the kind of health care my dad didn't, even through Medusa Cement Corporation, even then, for me to have any real good rehab or nothing. But it was all, that surgeon, Dr. Raimondo, he did such a great job, on me, that I did heal, even when I was involved in another accident, when I was healing. A tractor, we had this tractor that the hydraulic hose came off of and squirted me with hydraulic fluid all over those wounds, that were healing. That was a mess, but yeah, it was one hell of a thing, man. But that was the combination. Putting cannabis in there nearly cost me my life. As I was in the hospital, there I was visited. God, sent angels in to physically, how can I materialize? Because there was no record of anyone ever coming in to visit me. I was restricted where I was just to my immediate family. They came in and there were two of them, and they stood on both, on the right and left side of me, and they laid their hands upon me, and asked me, to receive Christ, for healing and for salvation. It was amazing. But their hands went inside of my body, into my soul. And I wasn't scared. It was wild, man. But such an awesome miracle of the living God. And, I ended up, still walking, being in the world after all that I went through with that, still stumbled back into, my old self. You'd think something like that, would turn you around. You'd be sleeping with the Bible, and I'm just saying it would be a part of you. You'd be in it, just glued, and doing everything that you could to draw near to the living God. But, unfortunately, I can make all kinds of excuses, but there were a lot of influences, look, those spirits know a lot about you, and they know what, how say Satan knows just what's how to tailor that suit of destruction, But you see, all of that was because of that goddamn cannabis. And I'm talking about the impetuousness of it. That's what it brought into it. And going through that, I recognized that. And then, it would be the same way in other times when I would be, high, And I'd do the same, get into some other damn, situation because, of that, being under the influence of that shit, making myself so there must have been some fucking murderous spirit, that influenced me to fucking do that, to do that with the gunpowder. Fucking tried to kill me, man. Had tried to have me kill myself, you know what I mean? But it really happened. That was fucking something else. When I went through Army boot camp, we went to the when we went to the grenade range. I didn't even think about. Of course, I don't think I told the Army or Air Force anything about that explosion I was in. I didn't see it as anything that I needed to tell them about because it wasn't anything that stopped me from anything really. I mean, if I would have been in some situation that it would have pronounced itself, well, then it would have been discovered and we'd have dealt with it. But it never was a factor, except for one thing. When I was on that I can tell you about, when I was on that grenade range, we were lined up getting ready to go in, and I was fucking shaking like uncontrollably, yeah, in that line. And the range sergeant saw me. That's how much I'm visibly shaking. And he pulled me out and put me into the front leaning rest position, like a push-up position, where he could see me. He knew I was trouble. And I snuck back into that line, and nobody told on me. And when I got out to the range, because of that, what I know now, is post-traumatic stress disorder. That fucking pronounced itself, from that incident. And I nearly fucking killed 2 range sergeants out there because of my the way I handled that the way that I handled that grenade. And moving forward, then with dealing with other ordinances, I can tell you in truth, I've dealt with things that are fucking super dangerous like that way, and I have never had that happen to me again. It never had that effect. Never did it ever manifest that way again. And I have, I've had my hands into, explosives, shit. I'm just saying that, yes. And, unexploded ordinances that, handling them, I mean, what have you. And never had those manifestations. I still don't understand of course, why it manifested like that. And it manifested and then never did again. Never. Very strange. In Jesus' name, I'm just, it's a curious thing though, isn't it? But anyway, that's what I've got to tell you about marijuana. I know that it should be something that our kids should not have access to. When you're an adult, that's your decision, but with our children, it should be something that they should not have easy access to. We've got to be mindful of these things. I don't know. I may have really fucking excelled, in school if it wouldn't have been for, marijuana. Who knows? Whenever I have committed to, any learning, I have been able, to accomplish whatever it was that I needed to learn. And, it's funny, even with taking a college, course that, yeah, the couple that I did take, I fucking aced them, was, like the teacher's pet, it's like, it's, just because I would just be so immersed in the subject. Uh, it can be a superpower, attention deficit disorder. Whatever, whatever the hell that. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say, and I hope that if I'd ask forgiveness, about raising my voice, but sometimes it's necessary, and I certainly don't feel it's hard for me to pretend that there's someone that on the other end of this when I don't even have any indication, but in the spirit before that I was heard, but I don't feel it now. So whoever it is that's monitoring this, is either is doesn't like me, or they are, well, when I say doesn't like me, it might even be antithetical. Is that the word? Yeah, I don't feel like I've got a friend on the other end of this now at all, and it's I'm about at the it's about the end of my communication, and what I'll do, I don't know about this. If I don't get the help that I've asked for, what will I do? I won't give up. I know that much, and I'll just have to be patient and wait upon Yah, and see what direction I'm moved, or who to talk to, or what have you.